But in regards to having a pet, that depends on you. That depends on you. Some people, love pets. They want to have fish. They want to have dogs, cats, and so on. You have to understand a couple of things. Number one, having a pet is a responsibility, but not just a responsibility to clean after them and so on, but also an halachic responsibility. You have to learn the halachot of what it means to own a pet. For example, you're not allowed to eat before your pet. Yes, even though you are a holy Jew, a good Jew, and all that good stuff, you could be the biggest rabbi in the world. If you have a dog and you're about to eat, you have to feed your dog first. Why? Or else it's called tsar ba'al chaim, where you're causing the dog suffering because he's not eating and you're eating. So you have to make sure that the dog eats before you. Dog eats before you. Second thing is, highly not recommended for you to have them sleep in your bed or even in your bedroom or even in the house. Why? Because the Mikubalim say and explain to us that the dogs specifically have tum'ah. They bring impurity. Doesn't mean that they're forbidden, because a dog is a good animal. A dog is called dog. It's called kelev because kulolev, he's all heart. Kulolev, that's why its name is kelev. But that doesn't make it perfect. It's also an animal that has a lot of tum'ah. So many religious people, religious Jews, do not have dogs because they don't want that tum'ah in their house. They don't want that impurity in their house. Plus, it comes with a lot of different issues. So if you don't have a dog, I personally would not recommend getting one. Unless you have a need for it. If a person is blind, they need a walking dog. A person is disabled in some way, needs something, some type of companion. That's, there's different reasons people get a dog. But if you're just getting a dog because you saw a picture on the internet of cute dogs and you want to get one for your kids, I wouldn't recommend it. I would say have another kid instead. Have another kid instead. Definitely take away any extra time that you have and any extra room in your heart. I wouldn't recommend getting a dog or a cat, even though I had a dog for 16 years and I cared for him a lot. He was a fantastic dog. I cared for him so much that I not only said a couple of stories about him in my shiurim, there's also one of my videos. One of the videos that we made into a movie has him in it. He's in the video. That dog probably learned more Torah than any dog in his generation. It was Talmid Chacham, that dog. But the point being is that I am not getting a new dog, not because I dislike dogs, but because it comes with certain things with it, certain baggage with it that I don't want to be involved in. And part of it is the tumah. So that's the second thing. Third thing is you have to understand that animals are muktzeh during Shabbat, meaning you're not allowed to pet them, and even walking them is something you have to be very careful with. You can't walk the dog with a long leash and the leash ends up hanging. You have to walk them with a short leash. You're also not allowed to pick up after them, which can create some animosity between you and your neighbors if they don't know why you're not picking up after your dog on Shabbat. So it comes with baggage. The point being is it's not worth it in my opinion. But again, there's different people have different opinions, different likes. I have a friend that is avrech in a kollel, but he has his house like a zoo. He loves animals. His house is literally like a zoo. He's got, 10 birds and dogs and this and that. And, for each his own. It doesn't make him less righteous. He's a fantastic person. He learns in Torah all day. He's an avrech. But, of course, he has a responsibility. Am I allowed to pray or learn Torah while an animal, specifically a dog or cat, is in the same room? And is it recommended to have a pet? So, it's not recommended at all. Not recommended at all to pray when there's an animal in the room. Not recommended at all. It's not a completely forbidden because sometimes it's there's no option. But you cannot face it, and also you have to make sure that it doesn't smell terrible. If it smells terrible, then you're not allowed to pray there. Tehillim is considered Torah if you're studying it. If you're studying it, you're looking at it with commentary, you're trying to understand what the verses mean, yes. But if you're just reading it without understanding a single word, it's not considered learning Torah. It's not considered learning Torah. It's good, but it's not considered learning Torah. But if you're studying Tehillim with commentary by the different sages, that's perfectly fine. So the rule of thumb that the Ramban and many of the Chachamim explain is that there is no beginning, middle, end of the Torah, meaning that the Torah is not being written in order. It's not being written in order. It's not like, let's say, for example, the event that happened at the beginning of this week's parasha definitely happened before the next story. It's not written like a history book. So last week's parasha that talked about a Judah, getting away from his brothers and then marrying his sons off, and then eventually the sons die, and then he ends up marrying Tamar, and then he has kids with her. This is a process that took years. And this was not necessarily something that happened before the story continued with Yosef, because as we see with Yosef, the story continued practically live, where as soon as he was sold, he went to Egypt already. So we see that there is no beginning or end. Plus, also, we see that there are certain verses in the Torah, certain even parashot in the Torah, where the event that happened in that parasha actually happened before the previous parashot, or even the previous book. So there is no beginning or end in the Torah. It's not told in order many times. It's not told in order many times. Hence the reason why it's very important to read the Torah like a Jew, which is to read the Torah with commentary by Rashi. Especially Rashi more than any of the other commentaries, because he's accepted as Rabban Shel Israel. That's what Rashi is, an acronym, Resh, Shin, Yud, Rabban Shel Israel, the Rabbi of Am Israel. That's what Rashi is. So it's very important. Everyone accepts Rashi. Ashkenazi, Sfaradi, Litvish, the Hasidish. Everyone accepts Rashi's commentary. Other commentaries, some accept, some don't accept. Some praise it as the best, and some lesser. So the point is, Rashi, everyone knows that's the standard. That's the standard. That's the blueprint to understanding the Torah. So when you learn the Torah with commentary by Rashi, he's going to tell you this happened at this time, and this is actually after the other event, or before the other event, and so on and so forth. So into this week's Parashat Miketz, it's a time where the story continues when it comes to the relationship between the brothers and Yosef, but that's also happening simultaneously with the story of Tamar, where the story of Tamar could have literally taken place during the 20 years that Yosef was gone, or it could even happen after. It could happen during. The point being is there is no beginning and end, but of course the Chachamim point out certain things that happen specifically at certain dates because we need to know those dates. But when there's no nafkamina, there's no specific importance, halachic importance for something to happen at a specific date, then there is usually a machloket, there's a debate between the sages if it happened before or happened after certain things. And you see it in a Gemara many times where the Chachamim debate, why is this mitzvah being said in a certain verse in this order when we know that the way you perform this mitzvah is not in order. Is not in this order. It's actually the opposite. And they debate why it's this and that, and they explain to you why Hashem wrote it this way and not in the order we would think. As he says, machshevotai lo machshevotechem. He doesn't think like us. So this is in essence, again, some of the things you learn from the commentary and, of course, the Gemara. Are there any specific requirements for a kippah? Well, one requirement is a kippah has to go on your head. That's what it has to go to. If it goes on your shoulder or your hands, I'm just kidding, by the way, but I have to be sarcastic a little bit sometimes. If it goes on your hands or feet, it's not fulfilling the obligation. Second, the source for the kippah is in the Gemara Masechet Shabbat, last chapter, where one of the Chachamim, when he was a baby, his mom would cover his head, in order to remind him that he is under Hashem's rule. So a kippah is in essence supposed to remind you constantly that you are serving Hashem. Number 3, a kippah is supposed to cover your entire head. Your entire head. That's the way your kippah is supposed to be. Big like mine. I mean, you may have a smaller head than me. I have a head like a moose. You may have a smaller head. So, so you may not need necessarily such a big kippah. You can get the kippot on our website, be'ezathashem.org. We have our kippot that are slightly smaller than the one that I'm wearing, because we assume correctly that most people don't have a big head like me. But the point is that those kippahs usually cover most of people's head. The more the kippah covers, the better. Now, does that mean that if somebody has a smaller kippah, they're wicked? No. It just means that they have a little smaller kippah, and in so many words, most of the time, you would notice that the bigger the kippah, the bigger the yirat shamayim. Not always the case, because as we always know, there's some people wearing a costume, some people wear a whole tarbush like the Rambam, but they're reshayim arurim. They're wicked people. So, but the point is that the bigger your kippah, the more of your head that it covers, the more you're showing Hashem that you love His mitzvot and that you acknowledge that He is leading over you, watching over you at all times. Other things is you only need to wear your kippah while you're awake. You don't need to wear it when you go to sleep. You can if you want to, just like your tzitzit. You don't need to wear it when you go to sleep. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Of course, you take off your kippah when you're, showering, bathing, things of that nature. You can take off you have to take off your kippah for that. You don't need to get your kippah wet every time. When you're in the bathroom or working and things like that, you keep your kippah on. You don't need to take it off. And that's it. I mean, generally speaking, it is a bigger deal in Israel, the type of kippah that you have, than it is in the exile, or the diaspora, the diaspora, where in Israel there's much more value given to people that wear a knitted kippah versus a kippah like what I have, and if it's black, and then sometimes there's even certain communities that even count the amount of parts that the kippah is split into, and if it's this type of black or a different type of black, there are all types of things and customs. I personally don't care for any of that stuff. I just wanted the biggest kippah that can cover my head, and that's only a stepping stone to eventually having the tarbush Be'ezrat Hashem when my rabbi tells me I'm allowed to have it. Other than that, whatever you have, whether it's a knitted kippah or it's fabric or it's this or it's that, doesn't really matter as much as the size of it. The size of it, it's more important, where it should be as big as possible to cover your head. But again, it's also a matter of comfort. The most important thing I would say, aside from everything that I say, is that you don't change. You don't downgrade. Whatever you start with is what you stay with. Meaning, don't ever wear a big kippah, but then when you're hanging out with your friends, or you're at a restaurant, or you're at a meeting, you downgrade to a smaller kippah, or you put a hat on. Don't do stuff like that. That could be even chilul Hashem. It's better to have a smaller kippah that you're going to wear all the time, even if it's literally half the size of mine and half the size of your head. It's better to have that little one all the time than to have one that changes with the weather. It's not good. It's same thing with some women, where they cover their hair with a mitpachat, but if they have an event, they have a wedding, they have a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, something like that, they put the wig on. That's a very, very serious problem. It can even be considered chilul Hashem. So it's a very, very serious problem. It's a really big mistake that people make. Surely it's better that they cover their hair with mitpachat, with the scarf, all the time, and I could never say that it's better that they would cover their wig with their hair with their wig the whole year. But the point being is that we do not downgrade in kedusha. We don't downgrade in kedusha. We only upgrade. That's also a reason why a Jewish woman that gets married, she has to cover her hair. If she gets divorced, halacha is she has to continue covering her hair with the mitpachat. Continue covering her hair with the mitpachat. Some poskim had a leniency that if she's having problems getting married after getting divorced, then she could change it to a wig, but that's assuming she could find a kosher wig in the world, which, in my opinion, doesn't exist. But the point being is, the reason why a woman that's married covers her hair with the mitpachat cannot take it off once she gets divorced, the reason why is because we do not downgrade in kedusha. We do not downgrade in kedusha. Anyone that tells you otherwise is simply mistaken. We don't downgrade. So again, when it comes to the kippah, it's important to have a kippah that you're comfortable with, and you're going to wear it all the time. all the time. Whether you're in a meeting or you're in a, whatever you are. You're in business or you're with your family. You know, sometimes people are religious at home. At home, they wear a tzitzit, they wear everything, but when they're with their friends, they go to work, they look like an average Joe. That's not good. That's not good at all. Kadosh Baruch Hu does not like that. Why? Because you're embarrassed of your Judaism. It's horrible. It's horrible. So imagine you have a kid, and he tells you how much he loves you. I love you, Abba. I love you, Ima. You're the best. You're the best. You're the best. And then one day you go out and you see your son is sitting there with a group of people. Say, hey son, how are you? And your son looks and goes, I don't know you. I don't know you. Why are you talking to me? I don't know you. I don't know you. You're not my father. You're not my mother. I don't know you. How embarrassing would that be? How horrible would that be? How heartbreaking would that be? It's the same thing with people that are religious at home or religious, only when no one's looking. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. A woman that covers her hair with a mitpachat needs to cover her hair with mitpachat all year round, all the time. You can have a fancier mitpachat and a less fancy mitpachat. That's fine. But to go from a mitpachat to a wig is 100% a horrible thing. Horrible thing. And that's even if you found a kosher wig. Horrible thing. Horrible. I have even stories of women that told me that they regretted wearing a wig one time. They wore a wig on an event because their son got married, so she wore a wig that she used to wear, but she took off because she has she washed her shurim, she took off the wig, she put a mitpachat, and she always wore a mitpachat, but then one day her son got married, her first son got married, older son got married, and she felt weird to see all of her family with just a mitpachat, so she put on a wig. She tells me she regretted it. Why she regretted it? Aside from the fact that her conscience told her that she's wrong and it's terrible and so on. Why? Because one of our son's friends hit on her. He didn't know she's not married. He didn't know she's her son's mom. Hit on her. He wanted to go on a date with her. She's like, at that moment I realized I look like a single girl. I can't even blame the guy. Can't blame the guy. Do you understand, Rabotai? It's very, very important to know that we do not downgrade in Kedusha, whether it's with the Kippah or the Kisurosh or everything else. We don't downgrade. The Torah says that one of the punishments for the Tower of Babel was that people were turned into monkeys and elephants. Does that mean that those two animals were not created during the 6 days of creation? No, it doesn't mean that. It's a good question. No, it doesn't mean that. It simply means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned them into other creatures. There are some creatures in the world that have neshamot in them, that have souls in them of human beings. As the Arizal says in Shara Gilgulim, that there are certain sins that a person can make, that their punishment is not even Gehinom or Kafekela, but rather they have to be reincarnated as an animal. For example, if a Jew is intimate with a non-Jew, and they don't do tshuva, and they end up dying, then they have to be reincarnated as a dog. They have to be reincarnated as a dog. So as I told you guys several stories about that, and there's other animals also. It's also always midah keneged midah. So that doesn't mean that all dogs have souls in them. Some do, some don't. I would say comfortably that most don't, but I don't necessarily know that for a fact. It just seems to be that case. The dogs that have souls in them are usually unusual. The animals that have souls in them are usually unusual. For example, there was a video made some time ago where there was a video of an elephant that was able to draw an elephant. The elephant was able to paint an elephant. Obviously, no, I don't think anybody that read some of what the Arizal and the other Chachamim talked about, Gilgulim and so on, it's not hard to believe that there's a soul, a human soul inside that elephant that knows how to paint an elephant. And there are other animals like that. There are also sometimes, unfortunately, people that get punished and they get reincarnated as plants. So there's actually a video I once saw, and it was actually in Eretz Yisrael, that a woman had a death in the family, and then she a few months later, however long later, she walked by and she saw that there was a plant, like a flower in the street, that as soon as she passed, it started moving. She thought she was hallucinating, so she looked back, and she saw the plant is, when she's there, she's moving back and forth, back at the plant, little flower. It's going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. She started going away from it, It stopped moving, it moved less and less. It came closer, as if it's happy to see her, starts moving back and forth. She thought maybe she's losing her mind, so she brought her friend, and her friend brought her phone, of course, and started videotaping this. And it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. You see how the friend comes next to the plant, nothing happens. She comes next to the plant is moving back and forth. She starts talking to it, and it responds in certain moves. Unbelievable stuff. Now again, you can say this is that. The point being is, if it's legitimate, if it's real, it's not a very difficult to explain it according to our Torah, which is that there is a soul in it that perhaps is connected to that woman in some way or another, family member or something like that. So there are many, many things. In today's world, everybody is a cameraman. Everybody's a newscaster with the phones and everything else. So a lot of things that we read in books that only few chachamim were privy to see in previous generations, today you actually see a lot of things in real life because somebody videotapes everything. So Baruch Hashem, there's many, many examples like this of souls going into different creatures, whether it be animals or it be rocks or it be dogs and so on and so forth. So that doesn't mean that those things didn't exist at the time of creation. It just means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took his existing creation and utilized it for something in addition to what the original creation was for. What does one do when in doubt whether or not Birkot Torah were recited? Well, first and foremost, he has to do tshuva. He has to do tshuva and say, I'm sorry to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he or she are treating the Torah so lightly that they forget that they even did a blessing. Because when a person does a blessing, he should remember it. So one of the ways to remember a blessing is by breaking it up into three. And not being in a hurry like we all tend to do, breaking it up into three. So whatever the blessing is. Let's say, for example, you want to bless water. I already blessed this water, but I'll give you an example. I'm not going to say the name of Hashem, but you see. So instead of saying, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shekol yom midoro, which is, takes you 2.5 seconds. Most of us do it. Some of us do it even faster. You break it up into three. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shekol niya midvaro. That simple addition of an extra 2 or 3 seconds of breaking up the blessing into three, you pause for a half a second in between, makes a world of difference. Makes a world of difference. So that's the first thing that he should do. He should do tshuva and make a commitment, or she should make a commitment to changing the way that they make blessings. I know it's hard, I know sometimes you're in a hurry and so on and so forth, but I promise you, those extra 2 seconds are going to save you a lot of headache. Now, the next thing is in regards to the brachot. The Gemara says that since blessings are a rabbinical enactment, anytime we forget whether we blessed or we didn't bless, we don't bless again. If we forgot, if we don't know let's say for example you want to drink or you want to eat an apple, but you forgot if you made a blessing on the apple. If you forgot whether you made a blessing on the apple or not, you don't make an additional blessing. You don't make, because blessings themselves are rabbinical enactment, we do not correct it by blessing again. And the reason why is because if you already blessed and you just simply forgot, that means that the second blessing is now not a blessing, but rather it's a sin of taking Hashem's name in vain. So that sin of taking Hashem's name in vain, saying Hashem's name in vain, is much greater than the benefit of blessing in case you didn't bless. So therefore, because that's a biblical sin, so you don't sacrifice making a biblical sin for the sake of benefit of a rabbinical mitzvah. So if you forgot whether you blessed or not, you do not do a blessing unless it's Birkat HaMazon. Unless it's Birkat HaMazon, because Birkat HaMazon is from the Torah. That's the only one. Otherwise, everything else is a rabbinical. But again, like I said, the most important part is to do tshuva and to make sure to put more thought into your blessings. Why does the Rambam speak about bloodletting in Deot? Is it to be practiced? Okay, so bloodletting is in essence, in the old days, the leaders in the medical world believed that bloodletting was healthy. was healthy, it was good for people, and even some of the sages in the Gemara used to do it. Only later on, as medicine evolved and we discovered even more things than we knew back then, did we realize that it's not as healthy as we thought, and actually could even be dangerous due to infections and so on. So in those days, at the time of the Rambam, which is almost 850 years ago, or at the time of the Gemara, which is 1600 years ago, and stories even going back 3,000 years, it was believed that bloodletting was a healthy thing to do. But today we have a more advanced medicine in certain aspects that has confirmed that this is no longer relevant. It doesn't mean that the sages were wrong 2,000 years ago. Because we all know that nature in itself has changed to a certain extent over the years. Not like the heretical scientists say and the philosophers say that they all, believe that we all came from some rock and somehow we're speaking today. They have a hard time believing that God created the world. God created a chicken completely made and didn't need a chicken to sit on an egg. They have a hard time believing that God created a monkey. They believe he had to come from some lizard. That they have a hard time believing that humans, were just born as humans, created as humans. It had to come from a monkey, and so on and so forth. They have a hard time believing that, but they have no problem believing that the monkey, the human, the lizard, the cat, everything else came from a rock. And the rock came from nothing. That they don't have a hard time believing, which is obviously absurd. But the point being is that the Gemara itself tells us how people were in those times during the debates that they're having and the different stories they have. And for example, they say, how does somebody know, if he has if he's a shepherd and he has sheep, he has a huge field and so on, how does he know how far to allow his sheep to go versus once it's too far and it's already perhaps reaching into into land that could belong to somebody else? The Gemara simply explains, and obviously the whole debate going back and forth, but the point is, Gemara says, as far as I can see. As far as I can see. Okay, so the next obvious question is, how far can the average person see? It said, they gave a description in the terms of that day, measurements of that day, which in today's terms, 10 miles. Meaning that the shepherd of that day, 1,500, 2,000 years ago, was able to see with the naked eye 10 miles. Today you can't see 150 yards barely sometimes. Some of us can barely see in front of us. We're talking about the average person was able to see 10 miles. 10 miles. Or another Gemara says, one of the tzaddikim was already older, but there was a fire in the building. He took two people, carried them and ran. A human being, one individual, took two human beings, carried them both, one in one arm, under his arm, and started running. Who has such a strength? Even the strongest men in the world don't have such strength. Now you could say, wow, were they superhuman back then? No, that was just human back then. That was the nature back then. We have gotten weaker, we have gotten smaller, we have gotten stupider. People have deteriorated over time, not just in their spirituality, but also in a lot of other things. We also have a Gemara that talks about how Moshe Rabbeinu and the entire tribe of Levi were all 20 feet tall. 20 feet tall. Now to us, wow, they were giants? No, they were normal to be a Levi. In order to be, if you were a Levi, you were 20 feet tall. Now how come you don't see anybody today that's 20 feet tall? Because 3,330 years have passed. A lot of things have changed. A lot of poison has entered our body. A lot of things have, a lot of the blessings that the previous generation were gifted are no longer being given to this particular generation, and so on and so forth. Point being is, nature has changed to a certain extent. It doesn't mean that we went from being monkeys to being humans. No, that's not. It's actually the opposite. It's actually humans. Hashem turned some of them into monkeys at the Tower of Babel as a punishment, and some of them into elephants as a punishment. But the point being is that the nature of people has changed, so has medicine to a certain extent, and there is actually a movie that we did, 5-part movie that we did called Torah, Science, and Ancient Wisdom. that I highly recommend for people to watch, because much of it talks about some of the ancient medicine that was already discovered at the time of the Gemara 2,000 years ago that is actually being utilized today. For example, anesthesia or different medicine for the eyes. There was better medicine in certain aspects available 2,000 years ago than what we have today. And certain things are not available today, or available today and weren't available back then. So it's not that the present is better than the past, and it's not necessarily that the past is always better than the first. It's just different. It's just different. Nothing new under the sun, in so many words. Things are just different.